Yo, 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 yo. Yo, visualize shark takes, hit the wave grinding. In the chat, gun shark odds make it rhyming. Sunday vibes, smooth bets, no confining. Hats engaged, can't stop us from shining. Bet on the spread, liking it, keep it tight. Push the odds further, jack on the hindsight. Odds fellows mind grasping the right sight. Hats, caps on heads, winners in plain sight. Hit the light, get in the chat, feel the flow, cash it, every dollar see the bankroll. Sunday grinding picks, now you gotta know. Extra points on the screen, sharp minds always glow. Big parlays, predictions we hold. Standing tall, betting knowledge all.
On a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday, it is NFL, the extra points, the big show, the three top dogs in the house. It is NFL Week 3, Sunday, September 22nd, 2024. The Shark, the Gun, the Odds Fellow. The first day of fall, a beautiful card on our hands. Come on over to the chat. Fire it up with us. Guns picked. What's going on, brother?
Man, I love beautiful Sundays in the fall. You got the pumpkin spice lattes. You got the harvest brews. You got the leaves falling. And, of course, you got football on Sundays, and you got the Odds Fellow coming off another loss in flag football. Might be on the hot seat. I'd have to ask Adam Schefter about that one. I'll pass to you, Odds. How you feeling this beauty?
Not going to be allowed back on the team plane if we go 0-4. There's a lot of teams in that spot this week. The three of us absolutely love the board. Do with that what you'd like, but this is going to be a fun show. There's a lot of angles, a lot of good spots. We got a lot to talk about, and fall is definitely in the air.
We will let Anthony lose on the flag football field and dominate in the NFL. First play, 1 o'clock, Tennessee, Nashville. It is a huge spot, Nissan Stadium here. Collaboration play, myself and Anthony. Throwing it to Anthony first, Tennessee -3.
Yeah, there's actually an interesting system I saw on the Action Network. Winless teams. Now, this was focused on road teams, and there's a number of teams, winless road teams against the spread. Overall, it's hitting like a 60% win rate. There's 8 of those, a lot that we're going to cover today. This is a winless team, but one that we're talking about at home, right? As the Shark, as Graham just mentioned. This is also probably an underplay, but really here what I'm fading is the Packers and Malik Willis and that offense, right? So when you break this thing down, really for me, it's the system. Do I trust Will Levis fully? Do I trust Tennessee fully? No, but at the end of the game, both these teams have ranked on the bottom half of, pass rush and run stop win rates. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins at the line of scrimmage. But what I'm really centralizing here on is that if you look at that Green Bay matchup, a lackluster performance by the Colts, Josh Jacobs ran the ball 32 times last week. And this plays into something the Gun is going to talk about. They didn't want to put the ball in Malik Willis's hand. It was a great game plan. They got the job done. And what that really comes down to is, how is Tennessee against the run versus how Indy's dead last against the run early on. They got absolutely shredded, including during this game. Tennessee, are they perfect? No, they're ranked 10th. Their pass rush and run stop win rates are better than the Packers. They're sitting at 22nd against the rush, 23rd against the run, compared to 29th for Green Bay for each. So I just don't think you're going to be able to get the same performance that they got out of Josh Jacobs, out of that running game, out of that offense to protect Malik Willis fully. So I think this is finally where the Packers fall short, just given the health factors, and Tennessee does enough to win. So give me Tennessee all day, and I'll toss it over to the Shark.
Yeah, my first official this week, Tennessee on the money line early week, money line or -3. Obviously, a lot of line strength there. And jumping off of what Anthony's saying, obviously a lot of on-field scheme there. But I want to talk about Tennessee because we're backing 4 teams this week that are 0-2, and all 8 of those losses are one-possession losses. This is prime real estate when you're buying low statistically, and we really love this card. And we're looking at Tennessee specifically. Go back to week 1, the game at Chicago. We talked about it last week, 17-0. Chicago gets a punt return for a TD and a pick 6, did nothing in the game, and somehow covered the spread 24-17. Go back to last week. Jets played them real tight. Game was tied in the fourth quarter. Jets walked away with a 7-point win. But again, an incredibly tight game. So just a great spot to buy low on an 0-2 Tennessee team. And I think more importantly here, this is the first time this year they've been favored. So books nailed it with the other team being favored against them. Now they have Tennessee favored. And you talked about Green Bay. I capped this game for Malik Willis and Jordan Love because we didn't really know who was going to play until probably overnight or something. Malik Willis truly is not a high-quality professional quarterback. This guy really reminds me of DTR last year on the Browns, Dorius Thompson-Robinson, and just ineffective and the limited scheme that Anthony talked about. But I think even more importantly, I actually capped this for Jordan Love. So let's talk about how the Packers fared last year with a better quarterback. They were 1-6 straight up on the road last year outside of the division. Outright losses to Atlanta, Las Vegas, Denver, Pittsburgh, and the Giants. This is where Green Bay performs terribly, even with Jordan Love. We love this play, not for Jordan Love, for the Tennessee Titans. Let's bang them in Nashville at 1 o'clock and throwing it to the gun along the same lines, a prop, Malik Willis under 13.5 completions.
Yeah, Oddsville pretty much alluded to it. So this team is with Malik Willis as the starter. We kind of already saw what the schemes are going to be when he's in there. They kind of don't want to take the ball and have him air it out in these situations. They want him to kind of stay in the pocket, hand off the ball, just be a little bit more of a game manager. They ran the ball 79% of their offensive plays last week. That is a great indicator of what the Green Bay offense is going to be. I don't think they really trust him in the passing game. I think he only had 14 passing attempts last week. Granted, he hit most of those. But I think in this situation, you're going against a Tennessee team that really defensively has been astounding, especially in the passing game. Their opponents are only you got the quarterbacks that they've gone against so far, 54.2% pass completion rate, 114 yards per game passing. They're ranked number 1 in opposing yards per game, and they're in the top 10 in rush yards per play and opponent yards per play in the passing game as well. So I think this is one of those situations that we're not going to allow Malik to mess up the game for them. I don't think they're going to be passing the ball a lot here. And if they are, you're going against a defense that knows how to get you into situations where you're not going to be completing passes. And you see in a prop here at 13.5 completions for Malik Willis, which is kind of on par where he was last week. But I don't think he's going to get it here versus this Tennessee defense, especially a Tennessee team 0-2. They've played as good a football on the defensive side of the ball. It's like the only thing and the only problem with this team going into this game is Will Levis. Stop making mistakes. Stop trying to be cute backyard BS that you're doing and just control the game and be a manager. And I think Callahan is really going to emphasize that with him this week. And I think it's going to be a little bit more cleaner game for Tennessee. At least I hope. But I like the prop on this one. Malik Willis under 13.5 completions. That's the play I'm going with here.
Yeah, and just want to point out that Will Levis has had some egregious turnovers in the first 2 weeks, but Green Bay only scored 16 points last week at home. And somehow Levis, even with all his mistakes, scored 17 points twice. So I think that defense on Tennessee is going to really lock in today. We love this play at 1 o'clock and keeping it moving. Also at 1 o'clock, out of division football, out of conference football, CJ Stroud traveling to Minnesota at US Bank Stadium. We're going to the gun for a total in this game under 46.5.
Yeah, I mean, we can just look at the injury report. We'll start right there. Mixon looks like he's not going to be playing. That's going to be depleted in the run game for this Houston offense that is highly touted going into the season, but really haven't seen them step out yet. Maybe a little bit in the Indianapolis game, but definitely not in the Chicago game. And then on the other side with Minnesota, they have their injuries as well. Jordan Addison not going to be playing this game. They are going to have Justin Jefferson. Looks like he's going to be playing, but he's coming off what looked like a bad injury last week, but it looks like he's going to be okay. I think he had a thigh bruise or something like that. I don't know if I got the injury correct on that one, but let's look at the matchup here. You have Houston coming off a 19-13 win, 2-0 in the year, plus 110 net yards, plus 4-point differential, and a Minnesota team coming off a big win themselves versus San Francisco. They own the San Francisco 49ers. We said it last week, 23-17, plus 38 net yards, plus 14-point differential, and Houston wants to pass the ball. That's their strength. CJ Stroud, 69.1 pass completion rate this season, 7.3 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, 0 INT ratio. And then Houston will struggle here. And what I liked is the trenches. You break down the offensive line versus the defensive line, especially in pass protection. Both sides aren't very good. The O-line allowed opponents to a 10.3% sack rate so far this season. Minnesota on the other side, their defense has got a 14.1% sack rate. So that's going to be a problem with CJ Stroud trying to get passes off. And then look at the other side with Minnesota. They have issues on the offensive line, 10% sack rate given up to opponents. And then on the defensive side for Houston, they get to the quarterback very well, 16.1% sack rate. So good defensive pass rushes on both sides with bad offensive lines, at least in the small sample size that we've had this season. So the way I'm looking at this, if you can't pass and you're getting rushed all the time, you have to kind of go to the run to try to figure out how to get some sort of offense. And I really haven't seen much out of this Houston team that would give me the confidence that this team is an over team. I think this is more of an underplay, knowing that there's going to be key missing players, especially offensive weapons on both sides of the ball. So I'm going to be going Houston, Minnesota under the total. I got it at 46 as the play.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And, one of the things I was looking at when I looked at this earlier, yesterday afternoon, CJ Stroud has been absolutely terrible in his career on the road outside of the division. 1-4 straight up at ATS. Truly almost incomprehensible when you think about the CJ Stroud we see him as now. But these losses last year were incredibly pedestrian. Outright loss at Atlanta. He took an outright loss last year at Carolina. I mean, what? And he also lost last year at the Jets. So, I mean, we're talking about almost like a split personality here. So I think Guns is totally onto something here. I think you're going to see a low scoring game. And Brian Flores, whatever he's doing with the scheme up there, the Minnesota defense is absolutely live. Speaking of being absolutely live, my second play, another AFC South 0-2 home favorite. We're going to Indianapolis, taking the Colts on the money line early week at -118, -1.5 now. And this is a very similar conversation. As we said, this is buy low week 3, and it's very specifically buy low week 3 in this division with 3 0-2 teams with 6 combined 1 possession losses. And you go through these losses for Indianapolis, took a tight loss at home in week 1 in the division versus Houston, and of course the game we just discussed last week in Green Bay. But that was Anthony Richardson's first career road start. You have to remember last year he got injured early season. He had only played 3 prior games, all at Lucas Oil Stadium. He was outdoors. He was outside of the division. It was his first road start. He didn't feel comfortable. Just throw that out. Come back to Indianapolis under Shane Steichen, a great young head coach. Shout to 1985. The dogs are out. And this guy is 6-3 ATS. Last 9 at home with Gardner Minshew. Richardson will be live today. And as we've discussed with Chicago the previous 2 weeks, Chicago covered a +6.5 last week. We had 6, so we pushed. But at 6.5, they are 2-0 ATS. In 2 games, they have gotten absolutely dominated. We talked about it at home. The week 1 game against Tennessee, completely dominated, very fortunate. And last week, Houston fumbled on the goal line in the fourth quarter. The game would have been 26-10. And out of reach, a fumble, then a field goal. This is not where the Bears are going to be traveling very well. This is classic rookie football. The media is all over Caleb Williams. He was on Hard Knocks. He's going to have growing pains. And I want to continue to remind people, Peyton Manning threw 28 interceptions his rookie year and went on to become one of the best of all time. These guys are not necessarily done forever if they look bad in their first year, but year 1 is ultimate growing pains. This guy is 56% throwing the ball, 0 TDs, 2 picks, and averaging under 150 yards passing per game. It's one-dimensional stuff. It's buy low Indianapolis. It's Shane Steichen. It's Anthony Richardson to get his first win as a pro. Buy it, live it, love it. And let's dominate. Going to Anthony for the next play. Giants at Browns. Hapless Giants. Useless Giants. Dable fired Giants. We hope soon. But along those lines, you like the under in Cleveland.
I do. And we're going to keep going back to totals all year. We crushed totals last week. I think that's going to be a trend, especially early in the year when these unders, continue to run well. I think, you find the matchups, you find the right spots. This one is an under on both sides, right? So it's really check all boxes. Now it may come down to what the Browns team ultimately does and what Browns defense shows up. Interestingly enough, they were brutal on the road last year. We talked about that. The home versus road splits defensively were awful, and that played out as well in the playoffs, hurting the Cleveland Browns team. This year it was flipped a little bit. They didn't play great at home against Dallas. They did show up on the road last week against Jacksonville. They gave up 33 against Dallas. I think that game, if you watched it, which I did, largely compromised by some of the offensive spots too. The offense did a little bit of a better job protecting themselves this past week. But now, MetLife Stadium, we're on the grass, the fall weather's in the air, right? Might not be the most perfect conditions. This New York Giants offense is 25th in the NFL. Now, how's that rank compared to Dallas and Jacksonville? Dallas 24th, Jacksonville 11th per DVOA. So you get a little bit of a kind of a skewed Dallas stat there because I do think Dallas has more talent offensively, but this is not a great Giants offense led by Dable, led by Danny Dimes, like we mentioned. The Cleveland Browns offense on the other side is 29th offensively. So they're actually ranked worse than all those teams I rattled off, including the New York Giants. What do the Giants do on defense? Last week, at least, it was a little bit of bend, but don't break. They gave up a ton of yardage, but I don't mind that, right? That chews up the clock and the time. They gave up 7 field goals and lost to the Washington Commanders in the head-to-head guns versus odds fellow battle. I'm up there, just saying.
You got lucky, man. I lost my kicker, dude. That stinks.
That's 100% correct. That kicker was an outlier. But 7 field goals and they lost. So what do I think is going to happen today? I think you're going to have a Giants red zone defense that continues to show up, 2 offenses that struggle, a Cleveland Browns defense that can be elite. And I think that all signs pointing to under 38.5. So I'll go low. This one's going to be a grind at MetLife out in Jersey. And 38.5 is what I saw and when I got it. Hopefully that's not moving too much on you guys.
Guns and I don't have anything on this game, but I want to throw it to the gun for a specific question. Guns picks. Give me an over-under what week Dable gets fired.
Let me see. It's going to be somewhere on a divisional game. That's what I'm going to be.
He's got the Cowboys he's got the Cowboys on a short week on Thursday at home.
I'm going to say home at Philly. That would be, what is that week? That's on the 20th, October 20th. If they get murdered by Philly, he's done.
Yeah, and Ant said it. I was looking at the schedule. We don't like Dallas today, but we love Dallas on Thursday. If the Giants go in here and get blown out again by double digits, and then they come back in their home stadium 4 days from now and lose by margin to the Cowboys, which seems to happen almost every time, I don't know if he makes it past week 4, to be perfectly honest.
I picked the Philly game for a reason because Saquon comes back. And if Saquon puts up 200 rushing yards on him, that GM's going to be so mad that that Dable the GM was the one that made that move. But,
Joe Shane.
Yeah, it's not going to be a pretty place if he has a big game.
Yeah,
so go low.
Great stuff, and I think it's an interesting prop. I know people like to bet who's first to get fired. Dable's very much in the conversation. This team has gone so far away from the playoff team they were 2 years ago. It's an absolute disaster. The polar opposite of an absolute disaster. My next official play, 1 o'clock in Tampa, taking the Bucks at -6. And, one of the things that I think is super interesting when you look on X, you look in a lot of articles you can read, most people are very polarized to either completely contrarian or completely public. I try to middle it. And I try to find really spot-specific analysis, numbers, and narratives. Tampa Bay is a public side here. And I see every contrarian bettor I know on Denver. So let's discuss it. I think this is continued upward momentum for Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay was 4-7 in the middle of last year. And we keep talking about this both in collegiate and professional football. There's not a lot of games. So when a team catches momentum at the back end of a season and then wins 2 games, it's not a sell point. They're really still on that upward arc. And you start to really go through Baker Mayfield's ATS trends at home, ultra specific stuff. In his career with the Bucks, he is 0-3 ATS at home in the division. He is 0-2 ATS at home as an underdog over 3 points out of the division. He's 4-0 ATS as a favorite or a small dog home outside of the division. And I was going through this psychologically. I said to myself, what's the counterpoint? Huge revenge win in Detroit last week. So I went back to those games I just mentioned. Well, all three of those games last year, margin home wins outside of the division, were off of road covers. And they were off of an outright win at Minnesota, an outright win at Green Bay, and a cover at Houston. And this really hones in on the psychology of Baker Mayfield. This guy's been disrespected his whole life. He had to walk on in college. This guy never takes a game off. He's bounced around the league. The Browns dipped on him. The Panthers dipped on him. The Rams moved him. He's finally home. He's still young. He's only 27. This is not a dude that lets down after a win. He gets more jacked up. And you go to those games last year, 10-point win, 14-point win, blew out the Jags by 18, and most recently, 37-20 against Washington on a -4. All the sharp contrarians had Washington in week 1. All of them have the Broncos here. The books love Baker. This is the heaviest home line he's laid in his career with the Bucs. And you go to Denver. Denver just lost by 7 points at home to Pittsburgh and scored 6 points. How do you expect them to somehow cover on the road against a better team in the heat on an early kick time? And you're backing a rookie quarterback on the road who was totally useless in week 1 and somehow backdoored the spread at Seattle to push or cover. Similar numbers to Caleb Williams. You don't want to back these rookies in year 1, particularly on the road. Buy the Bucs at -6 and let's dominate. Next play, we're going to Pittsburgh, Acrisure Stadium, also at 1 o'clock. Our favorite team so far this year, the Chargers, in a road back-to-back sequence, spent the week in Charlotte. They should be comfortable, but I don't think Herbert is going to be comfortable today. High ankle sprain. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to play. We're probably going to get a report while this show is still going on. Nonetheless, Anthony Latino loves the under 2 defensive teams. I believe the top 2 defenses in the league right now, under 35.
Yep, 35. That's a low number, right? We talked about this last week. Those totals in that 35 to 38 range, right? The books are really telling you something. Now, this line did drop, obviously, a little bit of noise. I think it opened all the way up around, again, and this is skewed in terms of when this open was, but I do think kind of the look-ahead line was under 42.5. That could have been preseason, so that might have already started dropping a little bit. And then you had some more noise pushing it even further down as the Herbert news kind of unfolded, because that one-dimensional offense, who's Herbert and the Chargers have lost a lot of weapons, kind of in an identity crisis mode rebuild, right? Not necessarily in a negative way. They're winning games. They're playing well. But both of these teams in particular, Shark alluded to it, have taken on the identity fully of their coaches and those coaches' programs, right? So you have the 8th ranked DVO team versus the 3rd, including the 6th defense versus the 1st defense. So again, right off the bat, right, 6 from Pittsburgh, 1st in LA and in the Chargers. These teams have a defensive mindset. That's what's keeping in games. Let's go over the totals here a little bit. Pittsburgh, 2 games so far, 18-10 victory over Atlanta, 28 points. 13-6 victory over the Broncos, 19 total points. Chargers, 22-10, 32 total points and a victory against the Raiders. Chargers, 26, Carolina putrid Panthers, which we'll get to a little bit later, 29 total points. That averages out to 27 total points across those 4 games, right? So even with Herbert, even with Stick, I don't care. It doesn't matter. These teams are going to run the ball. They're going to play smash mouth football. They're going to take the ball out of their quarterback's hands. Justin Fields and Justin Herbert, although both can be dynamic at times, and we've seen it with both of them, right? In terms of, especially Fields a little bit with his legs and his mobility. This is not the scheme that the coaches are playing. It's going to play right into a lot of field goals, a lot of grind. This is going to be a close one. I actually lean Pittsburgh pretty heavily, just given a lot of the Herbert noise. And I think Pittsburgh at home, a tough place to play. But this game's going under 35.
Yeah, I would agree. And I wanted to back the Chargers. I was talking about this last night with a couple guys on X. If there's a bad spot for the Chargers in the first 8 weeks, it is this one. It's a road back-to-back. Herbert's hurt, and they also get Kansas City at home next week.
Yeah.
That's the biggest game of their home calendar. So it's just a dead zone spot in every particular category you want to evaluate it. So it's unfortunate. We're going to probably back them 80% of the games this year, but this is a tough one. Guns, any thoughts on this one?
I mean, I'm loaded on futures with the Chargers. I think I'm very high on them overall in the season. I just think this is a bad spot for them. Like you said, back-to-back road. Then they got a situation with Kansas City, division rival, going in this game, and they're an underdog. They're a 3-point underdog to a Pittsburgh team that can't score points. Okay, that's a telling story there. Granted, that defense for Pittsburgh has looked, I would say the best in the league so far. Maybe top 5 at best. So, and then you got a quarterback that's playing with a bad ankle. I mean, the mobility's not there. Granted, Jim Harbaugh's kind of oriented a more run first type of situation for them, but it's just not a spot for them. Just a non-divisional game. It's not important to them. They're already 2-0. Yeah, I'm passing on this one. I'll just watch. That's all I can do.
No, I agree. And as I said, we love the Chargers. It's going to be tough. And Pittsburgh is equally in a tough spot themselves. Home opener, 2 road wins. They weren't great in either of them. Kirk Cousins and the Falcons were terrible at home in week 1, and they beat the aforementioned Broncos 13-6 because the Broncos offense is really putrid. So we don't really love Pittsburgh either, and that's why the under really is the top look in this game. Final game at 1 o'clock. People were asking about it. Our guy Spanky Weber hanging out here on a suddenly not so casual sharp Sunday, but we don't know anything about this game. Excuse me. We have a lot of data on this game. We'll give you the data, but this is a tough game. I'll throw it to the gun first. Philadelphia at New Orleans. New Orleans off 2 blowouts. Philly cratering. What do you think about this one?
You want to take Philly on the bounce back, right? You played on Monday Night Football. You had basically control of the game. You decide to throw a little screen pass. Saquon drops it. They proceed and drive down the field pretty efficiently, and Atlanta gets the victory over Philly in primetime. So you got short rest week, deflating loss. Sometimes you can lose the same game twice, but you're playing a Saints team that is just playing really good football right now, especially on the opposite side of the ball, which is kind of shocking to me because I thought this team was on a regression. With Kubiak, I wasn't really high on him. He's done very good things. I mean, they looked great against Dallas last week. And I think the strength of this team is running the football. If Alvin Kamara in the backfield, as long as he's running efficiently, that kind of opens things up on the passing game for Derek Carr. And I think with that Philly team, what we saw against Atlanta, you can run on the Philadelphia Eagles pretty efficiently. And Atlanta basically did that last week, really getting away from the passing game and running the football because they could. And I think you could have a situation here with the Saints that they could just efficiently run the football and methodically beat up this Eagles team like they did last week versus Dallas. I want to fade the Saints here coming off that massive win on the road, but I haven't seen anything out of the Eagles yet, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that would lead me to believe that this team can stop anybody on the defensive side. I want to watch for a little bit. I think we have to wait on the Eagles and find a better spot. I'm not touching the Saints either. So for me, it's a complete pass. Let's just see what happens.
Yeah. I wanted to take a side of this. I got to be honest. I think that this really is a market split. This is very contrarian Philly, but I got to be honest with you. I think there's some bad contrarian looks this week. And we said Denver's one of them. I think Philly could be a bad contrarian take because I think New Orleans fits the same category as Tampa Bay. These are NFC South teams, both with new quarterbacks starting last year who were not very good in the first 10 weeks and showed significant momentum to finish the season, and it's continued. New Orleans and Tampa Bay are basically the same team from a statistical flow standpoint. So you don't necessarily want to sell these teams just yet because they're really just starting to get into their flow. And Guns mentioned it. This coordinator, Clint Kubiak, son of ex-coach who used to coach the Broncos, I believe, Gary Kubiak. He's a young guy. He's only 37 years old. But I think the key point here, explosive offense. He was the passing game coordinator last year for the 49ers. So this guy is familiar with talent and how to spread the ball around. We know Kyle Shanahan is one of the most innovative play designers in pro football. So I don't think this is going anywhere anytime soon. And I think specifically because I think their play calling is so unique that teams don't know how to scheme for this team right now. And speaking of not knowing how to scheme for a team, we keep talking about this, but the Eagles have not looked the same since they lost their offensive and defensive coordinator from the Super Bowl team. The city is calling for Nick Sirianni. They flipped on him. They don't like him. There's even some chirping against Jalen Hurts in the Philadelphia media. This is not a bull market at all. And frankly, I think New Orleans continues the momentum today, at least for the next few weeks. I wanted to get there. The only deterrent for me here, New Orleans started last season 3-8-1 ATS, and we bought them. I think we went 4-0 in the last 4 weeks with them last year. They're now 6-1 ATS in the last 7, which I think is an interesting metric point, as we always talk about. It's not necessarily pro athletes, it's numbers, it's frequencies, it's patterns. 3-8-1 and then 6-1 is now 9-9-1. They are dead 500 over 19. I'm telling you guys, we never know why, but it's fascinating stuff how it gets back to the average. So the point is, I think they're right on the average now, not as much of a buy low statistically as they were going back to week 12 last year. I'm purely not on it for that reason. It's pro football. There's a lot of reasons, pro and con. That's my con. Anthony, any comments?
Somebody asked about the total. I would lean over. I think it could get a little track meaty. The only reason I don't is I think you could get a better live line during the game or in the second half. This is one where I think you might get a little bit of regression on the New Orleans side. And the Philly defensive unit, like we said and alluded to, that's probably been the most disappointing unit out of all these units on the field today. So a lot to unpack there. I lean over. I think you get a little bit of a better line in game.
Yeah, and truthfully, you look at the splits in terms of the totals. Philadelphia played a game in Brazil, 34-29. Last week, primetime, total dud, but that's home at the link. Kirk Cousins wasn't moving the ball. This is in the dome, clean air. This is going to be up and down. So I think probably the over. And one final point on this game. I put out a poll earlier this morning to see what people thought of this game because it was the only one we didn't have an official on. And I think probably not coincidentally, the market is almost a dead split. Eagles are getting 52% of the vote and Saints are getting 48%. It looks like a presidential election. It's a dead split. So I think people are very split on this game. We don't really know, but let's move it to 4 o'clock. First 4 o'clock play, hold your nose play. The gun has been up since 7 in the morning. He was feeling dirty this morning. We're going to the West Coast, Pacific Northwest, and backing the Dolphins and Skylar Thompson at +4.5.
Yeah, I was up all night watching BYU, and then I turn around, get 5 hours of sleep, 7 a.m., crank the coffee. I'm writing up plays all over the place, and I'm going to be backing this Miami team here. I love the statistical, and I know they're going to be without Tua, but let me just talk about this game here for a second. Miami coming off that loss last week versus divisional rival in Buffalo, 31-10, but they won the yardage battle +119. So they lost by 21 points and were a +19 net yard average in that game. That's pretty telling right there. And then you got Seattle. They were unimpressive last week against what we know is a very bad Patriots team. Took them overtime to win that game 23-20, 2-0 on the year. +61 net yard average, +5 point differential. But we have to understand, they haven't played anybody. They played the Patriots and the Denver Broncos. In Seattle, pass-oriented offense with Geno Smith passing for 73.9% pass completion rate, 7.2 yards per attempt. But they're going against a Miami defense that's been solid in their first 2 games of the season, holding opponents to 252 yards per game, 139 in the passing. And then you got Miami going with the backup, Skylar Thompson. But Seattle played Denver in week 1 versus a rookie quarterback. So, and then they played the Patriots with Jacoby Brissett, and he hasn't been impressive. And it took them to overtime to win that game. Then you have Miami, rest advantage, if you want to look at that a little bit. So they played Thursday nights with a little bit of rest advantage in there. Also, 4-1 ATS last 5 games versus NFC opponents. Look at Seattle, 0-4-3 versus non-conference opponents, and 0-1-1 this season already. 4-10-3 ATS as a favorite last 2 seasons. Seattle also going to be without their star lead running back, Kenneth Walker. Not going to be playing in this game. So that is another element that's going to make them more pass-oriented today, in my opinion. Going against a Miami defense that has already in 2 games versus Buffalo, versus Jacksonville, done very well at containing them in the passing game. So regardless of the QB situation for me, I think they're going to mold Skylar Thompson, who's been with that organization for 2 or 3 years at this point. He's played, he's got reps. I'm not so concerned with him because he's got weapons. He's got a great running back in Devin A-Chain. And they're going against a Seattle team that really, to me, while they are 2-0, they've played 2 bad teams in a row and only won by a possession or less. And they're going against a better team here in Miami. So I'm going to go Miami here, plus 4.5 as a play.
Yeah, this game for me, I wouldn't disagree because I think your point about the Seahawks sample is very noteworthy. Didn't cover at home against Bo Nix. Didn't cover against Jacoby Brissett. Skylar Thompson is probably in that same conversation, crazily enough. Obviously a journeyman here from, Kansas State Guns, I think?
Yes, that's correct. Kansas State.
So I think the Guns is balancing his ticket. He faded Kansas State last night. Now he's buying K-State quarterback. We're talking about presidential races here. We're a month and a half away. We're balancing the ticket. I don't have a side here. Anthony, any comments?
No, I really want to see how it plays out. I do trust that coaching staff a little bit. I just think it's going to be very different. Now, I think what you want to see and like is if you trust that coaching staff, I think defensively they'll step up. And I think McDaniels with a full week to prepare the offense is just a different ball game. So slight lean Dolphins for me with the points, but not one I wanted to officially touch.
Yeah, best of luck there. I would lean towards the Dolphins, however. My first play at 405 here, taking the Raiders at -7, -5.5 now. This is another one of those spots. Joes versus pros, and I'll be with the Joes on this one, and I have no shame doing it because I think Carolina is an absolute gas can no matter who the quarterback is. I think Tom Brady would lose with this team this afternoon by margin. And you really start to look at what's going on in this game. This is a polarization of coaching styles and ability and team competitive mentality. I said this in week 1, and truthfully, it was more speculative because Dave Canales had never coached an NFL game. I said I didn't like his mentality. I thought he was too soft. He was too quiet. And then he proceeded to go on the road and get blown out by about 40 points. And then you saw it last week, another margin loss. And now moving quarterbacks. This is a psychological move. I think this is him trying to save his job more so than actually improving the quarterback position. Because I think that now in this results-oriented NFL environment, he's thinking I might get fired before the halfway point in the season if I lose 5 straight games by 20-plus points. So he's not necessarily doing this to upgrade the quarterback. It's a desperation move to save his own job, which then leads to how does that affect the group? Does that inspire the group? I don't think so. I think that looks like desertion. And I think that leaves them completely empty as if they already weren't empty. And the fact that Bryce Young has not been traded and they're saying they're not going to trade him, talk about holding 2 quarterbacks in complete purgatory. I think the psychological dynamic of this locker room is going to be even worse than it was last week. And you talk about the Raiders. The Raiders are dogs. The only significant favorite I'm backing this week, I got 2. I got the dog Baker Mayfield, and I got the dog Gardner Minshew. These are both guys that bring it every single game because they've been disrespected probably since high school. And you saw in week 1, tight game at the Chargers. We love the Chargers. Raiders played them tough until the 4th quarter, and then a win last week against Baltimore. People say, let down this, let down that. I don't think so. Antonio Pierce with this group is 5-1 ATS at home. The last time he faced a backup quarterback at home, 63-21 against Easton Stick. They do not hold back. This is a great coach. This is a grinder quarterback. Devontae Adams, in my opinion, is the best leader as a wide receiver in the sport. And their defense is also littered with leaders and top dogs. Final point on this game. Last year, Andy Dalton started 1 road game. He got blown out at Seattle. Game was 37-20 in the 4th quarter. Lost by 10. Didn't cover. Same line, -5.5. Vegas will get there today. It's their home opener. It's not a look ahead. They don't play in the division next week. Buy the Raiders today. It's chalk, but it's right. -7, 1 unit. Next play, collaboration play. Big time stuff. Jerry World, 4:25 p.m. Tom Brady in the building on the call. I haven't caught one of his games yet. I will catch this one. We love the road team. It is an official from the gun. Baltimore on the money line.
Yeah, put that hat down. You know better than that. We're gonna
That's
be
a
back.
fade hat. That's a fade hat today.
Fade hat is engaged. Here we go.
Fade
Dallas.
hat is engaged.
Baltimore versus Dallas. Jerry's World, Arlington, Texas. 4:25 is the kick. And yes, Tom Brady will be live in the booth commentating on this one. 0-2 on the year for Baltimore, winning the yardage battle in both games. Just losing in most egregious fashion. -5 point differential. But like I said, they are dominating in the yardage in both situations. That's Kansas City and the Raiders. Also, you got Dallas just coming off a bad loss, 44-19. Losing the yardage battle, -79 net yards, -1 turnover ratio. But what Dallas, a good home team, right? 2023, they were 8-0 straight up, 62 ATS. But go look at the teams they played in 2023. We're at home. Jets, Patriots, Rams, Giants, Washington, Seattle, Philly. But that was a Philly team late in the season when that team was a falling knife and lost like 7 or 8 in a row, whatever it was. Then Detroit. And the teams they didn't cover was Detroit and Seattle. And those teams were kind of playoff caliber teams in 2023. And what does Baltimore want to do? We saw it last week with the Saints. Baltimore is kind of similar in their offensive schemes. They want to run the football. They run for 5.7 yards per carry in their first 2 games. That ranks them 3rd in rushing yards per play and 6th in rushing yards per game. Dallas defense has been carved up in the run game. That's been their problem. Is their pass rush good? Absolutely good. Run game, they can't stop a cold. I think I said that wrong. All right, but 4.9 yards per carry so far this season. That ranks them 23rd in the league in defensive rush. Then you have Baltimore. Has performed very well versus the NFC. 9-1 straight up in the last 2 seasons with an average margin of victory of 8.9 points per game. And look at the outcomes and the teams they played in that sample size. Detroit beat them at home 38-6. Seattle 37-3. Crushed them. The Rams beat them 37-31. And the 49ers, when they were highs of highs and people were already buying their Super Bowl tickets because the 49ers were going to be there, beat them in their own house on Christmas Day, 33-19. Dallas, 0-4 ATS is a dog, too. That's an interesting stat there. Granted, they're a small dog in this situation. And 3 of those games were 3 points or less. So this is when they're a short dog, they're a fadeable team. I just think Dallas lost last week was not a fluke. If you're a run-oriented offense, you can control what Dallas does. 71% of New Orleans' offensive plays last week were running the football, and they won by 25 points. Dallas is one-dimensional in the run because their run game isn't great. They only average 2.5 yards per carry. Losing Tony Pollard has really hurt them. And Dallas and Baltimore has a good pass rush. So in those situations, if you make Dallas one-dimensional and you just run the rock as much as possible against this anemic Dallas rush defense, you're going to score a lot of points. I think Baltimore blows them out here. So give me Baltimore money line -115 as a play.
Taking a breath. I'm fired up. Completely aligned here. Gun's making a lot of great points. And I just want to jump back into the conversation about these 0-2 teams. Baltimore, surprisingly, 0-2 straight up and ATS. But go back to week 1, 1 inch away from tying that game in the opener at Kansas City. And last week, up 10 in the 4th quarter, just took their foot off the gas against the Raiders. And we just talked about how much of a grinder team the Raiders are. I don't think the Cowboys have that dog in them. I think they're poorly led. I think McCarthy's the wrong coach. He's at this point, more or less just, I don't know. He's out the door, in my opinion, after the season. I think they're looking at potentially Belichick. But staying within this particular game, Lamar Jackson, after last week, said, we need to get our swagger back. And last night I was watching, there's a new Gatorade commercial with Lamar talking trash to some guys. And I said to myself, I think that is a synchronicity. And I think that speaks to exactly what you're going to get today with the Ravens. The Ravens need this game. They cannot go 0-3. And people want to say it's a Dallas bounce back and it's a Ravens bounce back. Dallas is 1-1. It's a big difference going 0-3 and 1-2. And if you want to get your swagger back, what could be a better spot? Jerry World, National, Tom Brady call. And as Guns mentioned, a spot where Lamar Jackson is 10-1 ATS on the road in his career against the NFC. And I think a really key point here on Dallas, we talk about how the Saints are continued by because they're in the beginning of their journey upward. Same with the Bucks. Dallas had been favored in 16 straight home games with Dak Prescott before today. The last time they were a home underdog was to Tom Brady and the Bucks in week 1, 2022. And they took a 19-3 loss. And Dallas was on an ATS heater for about a season and a half. And as Guns mentioned, they are actually 0-4 ATS in their last 4 home games. And it's just your classic crater down. Tight win against Seattle, as Guns mentioned, by 6. Then a 1-point win against Detroit. So they're coming down. Then a blowout loss in the playoffs to Green Bay. And then another blowout loss to New Orleans. They won at Cleveland in week 1 because Cleveland gave them the game. I agree with Guns. This could be significant margin today. We love Baltimore at -110. Another game at 4 o'clock here. A lot of moving parts. A divisional game that has significant intrigue historically. Today's game really is unfortunate with the amount of injuries. Niners at Rams, 425. However, I think the injuries are giving us a slight edge in the prop market as players who are not used to getting the ball will get the ball. Guns picks, looking at one specifically.
Yeah, I think this specific situation, you have to look at the injury report. It's full in this game from both sides of the ball. We got no Deebo Samuels. We got no George Kittle. On the other side, no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua. The offensive line is messed up. I mean, the Rams are just a laundry list of injuries. But when we look at the key weapons on this one, you got to ask yourself, okay, Brock Purdy, who are you going to be throwing to? I would say the chalk answer is Brandon Ayuk. But I don't think that's the way we should go with this. I think we should go with the value on this one. And Juan Jennings should be at least the number 2 target today. And if you look at his first 2 games with a full lineup with Deebo and Kittle in the lineup, he had 64 yards in the first game and then he had 37 yards, 2 catches last week against Minnesota. So I think if there's going to be more targets thrown at somebody, it's this guy, Jennings. Purdy's got some sort of comfortability with him, but I think without Deebo in the lineup, without Kittle in the lineup, there's going to be a lot of looks in his direction, knowing that this LA Rams team are going to be focusing on not letting Brandon Ayuk beat him. So if there's anything, I would take receiving props on Jennings. I got it at 42.5 on his receiving yards, and I like his receptions on this one at over 3.5. Granted, he had over this in his first game, only had 2 in the last game. But like I said, Purdy's got to throw to somebody, and I think it's going to be Jennings today. He's going to have a big game, in my opinion. So those are the props I like.
I wouldn't disagree. I think over 3.5 is a great look. Any comments?
No, I think it's a good look. You use those injury reports and the schematics to your advantage in the prop market. I think there's so many props on the board. I think that's a place you can really find some value.
And if you got a fantasy team, go look and see if that guy's still a free agent. Pick him up today. I think he's gonna have a big game.
Yeah, and even some of the other players too, because outside of Ayuk and Jennings, like there's got to be a backup tight end. I think like some kid from I don't know. I was looking at it last. I never even heard of him, like Scott Scambert or Schobert or something.
Yeah.
And people said I look like I'm in investigation mode. I was sleuthing around for the backup tight end on the Niners yesterday.
Major pain over here.
Next play, 425. Oh, Guns. Yeah, you have
it. Eric Schobert is the guy.
Schobert.
I was in the chat. I was saying you look like a police sketch for a fugitive right now.
I mean, I was up all night just scouting the Niners backups. I mean, what can I say?
Yeah. Shark scallions.
Last 425 game. We don't have anything official on this one, but it's going to be a great game. Detroit -3 at Arizona. And I think the conversation really with Arizona here is Kyler Murray finally going to come into his own? And when I was looking at this yesterday, I was actually surprised. He's in his 6th season. Doesn't it feel like he's only been around for like 6 seasons? And in that sample, he's 16-18 ATS at home. And we've said this over and over. He's always been better on the road for whatever reason. But I think last week potentially is telling us that the tides are turning. The Rams had beaten them 9 straight times in Arizona, I believe. And then all of a sudden, Arizona beats the Rams 41-10. So potentially 5 years of this BS flipped last week against the Rams. That means it could just overall flip. They might be a better home team. And honestly, Jonathan Gannon here, a defensive-minded guy, he's brought a great mentality to this group. I remember last year, Joshua Dobbs was covering spreads at home. He actually beat the Cowboys by 12 points at home last year. This is Gannon, a good coach, a defensive coach, maybe finally getting Kyler Murray to where he could be athletically and getting his mind focused. So I think that whole point does point to Arizona here. And the counterpoint is the fact that Detroit is still inherently a buy low, probably until they win a championship. Dan Campbell fits that dog model of Antonio Pierce. We love him as a head coach. So you don't want to fade them off a loss, particularly a loss where Dan Campbell took responsibility for it because he didn't kick a field goal to close the half. And they probably would have won the game because later on they needed a touchdown that they couldn't get, but they were in field goal range. So Dan Campbell took total responsibility for that. And we know that's why these players rally around him so well. Detroit's going to play a good game here today, but Arizona also is a buy element. I honestly think you could see an over here. I hadn't really looked at it until we were just talking about it right now, but I think Detroit will play much better offense. They played a poor game at home in week 1. 26 points, 6 of those in overtime. And then last week held to 16 points. This offense has not done anything. And Arizona's offense is pretty explosive. You saw them put 28 on the table at Buffalo and 41 last week. And you're seeing a high line here at 51.5. I found it to be interesting. The last time these teams played was actually December 19th, 2021. And just to give you guys a snapshot to how quickly the NFL can flip, December 19th, 2021, it was Dan Campbell and it was Jared Goff. You guys aren't going to believe this. Arizona played at Detroit. And what do you think Arizona laid there?
Arizona played at Detroit. It had to be
December of 2021.
It had to be a big number. 7.5.
12.5.
That's too many points.
Unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
We're not even 3 years removed.
Yeah,
we had Arizona laying 12.5 in Detroit.
Think about that comeback, right? Look what you're looking at, data-wise.
And now Detroit's favored on the road. I mean, that is wild. And it just really speaks to how quickly the NFL can turn over. I mean, that blew my mind. Yeah. I actually did a double take. I looked at three different databases yesterday because I was like, wait, what? Just unbelievable. So the moral of the story is over in this game. It's going to be really tight at that -3. And you saw that last year. Detroit on the road with a lot of these -3 lines started pushing. They pushed at the Chargers. They won by 5 on a 3.5 at the Saints. 3 road for the Lions is really tight. Take the over and enjoy that one. Nightcap game here. Anthony has some comments. We'll talk about it. Chiefs at Falcons. This is going to be an interesting game, and we'll throw it to the gun afterward. Ant, talk to me, and we'll throw it to the gun.
Yeah, so on the primary side, I think for me, this is Atlanta or nothing, right? You see this line floating around 3.5. I just think it's a tough spot for the Chiefs, right? Luck box Chiefs getting the calls. You see all the ref memes with the refs on their side late in games. The Chiefs are the defending Super Bowl champs. They're there for a reason. A lot of people you heard in the offseason said last year was your chance to get them, and they could be back in the mix this year with a better defense. But they're down Pacheco tonight. They're on the road, coming off 2 tough, close games, like we said, right? They kind of eke it out against Baltimore by the toe, and then they get the penalty and then the late field goal to push through in week 2. The Chiefs are a solid squad, but the Falcons also trending upward in the other direction. 2 winnable games on their end. They really could have beaten that Pittsburgh Steelers team if it wasn't for some mistakes and a great defensive effort from the Steelers. And then they get the come from behind win. Finally saw Kirk Cousins starting to look a little bit more comfortable in that offense with all those weapons. So I think just all signs kind of point to a Sunday night close game. I think one that Atlanta probably wins outright. If you want to take the 3 or 3.5, I'd honestly probably just take the money line because I do think Atlanta gets the victory at home. You might also see just narrative wise, they're doing some other stuff at halftime. I think they got a big celebration, a Ring of Honor type of induction ceremony for the owner and for another player. I think it's Matty Ryan. I think Matty Ice getting honored. So, you'll have the people in the building, right, in Atlanta, a team trying to get back on track and trend upward. So I think it's a perfect little spot, Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, Guns.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back. I just reiterate on the Cardinals, and I would just, as we were talking about this, I think Cardinals are a great pick at first half. You watch the first two games; they were up 17-10 on Buffalo, and of course they were up 24-3 on the Rams. I think if anything, they turn up in the first half and kind of pump the brakes in the second half. And that in non-conference in 2023, that was the same scenario for them too. So if there's any take on that, I would take first half. But going back to this game, Kansas City and Atlanta. Kansas City has done nothing impressive so far. I just think they've got the luck bug going. A toe in the end zone, a PI called on 4th and long, a 51-yard field goal to end the game, only winning by 1 point. A fumble by Joe Burrow, but that was a fumble return for a touchdown. So it wasn't the offense doing the work here, folks. It was the Kansas City just falling into lock. Now you've got your first road game of the year. You got to go to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And you got an Atlanta team that really played a very clean offensive scheme, run the rock, pound the rock. That offense is very good. Defense has a lot of questions. I do understand that. But Atlanta in this situation, and then of course everybody says, "Oh, Kirk Cousins in primetime is bad." Do you realize Kirk Cousins is 8-3 straight up in his last 11 primetime games? It's like, does anybody know that? So you got him as a dog here. 14-9 ATS is a home dog dating back to 2014. 4-0-1 ATS is a home dog. Last 2 seasons for the Atlanta Falcons. I think this is the perfect spot for Atlanta, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be taking Kansas City. I think the price of Kansas City right now is way too high. I'm going to be buying Atlanta, regardless of the highs of highs coming off that primetime game with Atlanta. I think they back it up with another. I'm high on Atlanta all year. I think they're going to win the division in the South and the NFC South. And I just think Atlanta is a come-up team, not a team that's just a fluke what happened on Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, the line here being so short should tell you the story. I mean, this opened at 4.5. It's steamed down to 3. There's some, I think maybe a 3.5. I think, or maybe all 3s now. But it's just a brutal spot for Kansas City. As Guns mentioned, barely covered against the Ravens. Did not cover against the Bengals. Barely won, and that's that arc I always talk about. When you win and cover barely, then you win and you don't cover. Usually that leads to a non-cover and an outright loss. And we were talking about this right before the show. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I believe it was 2022. I think it was week 3. The Chiefs went on the road. Interestingly enough, Matt Ryan was the quarterback for the Colts at that point in time. And the Colts did beat the Chiefs in a low-scoring game. I believe 20-16 or 21-16 or 17 or something like that. And this is just not where the Chiefs are supposed to perform well. I think, interestingly enough, you talk about the law of averages. As you said, Kirk Cousins is immensely improving in these primetime games. That old narrative does not apply anymore. And I think an interesting sell point for Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes started his career 1-5 ATS on the road at the NFC, so he was not very good. He's actually 6-1 ATS last 7 at the NFC. So now he's too hot. And I think the sell point would be here. And as you guys mentioned, Matt Ryan being honored, that will be a juice point. This will be a big home game. They took a loss in their only home game so far. It was very close. It wasn't so much that Pittsburgh dominated them by any stretch. They just didn't really optimize at all. Atlanta's definitely the sharp look in this game. I'm not on it yet, but Atlanta is definitely the sharp look in this game. Going to Monday night, we got a lot going on here. This is the only 3-way collaboration on this show. We don't usually talk about Monday night, but when it's 3-way, we have to talk about it. I'll throw it to the gun first. 7:30 p.m. Highmark Stadium, Orchard Park, New York. Bills hosting the Jags. Jags sitting at a nice-looking +6 or +5.5. Guns picks at official.
Yeah, we got a doubleheader here on Monday night. I had to double check to make sure I had the time right. Yeah, it is 7:30 p.m. East is when this game kicks off. But you have a Jacksonville team that's 0-2 on the year, -4 point differential, -54 net yard average. Buffalo coming off a divisional win versus Miami. A must need, of course. Tua getting hurt in the process is kind of alluded to the win, but regardless, Buffalo got it done 31-10. Lost the net yardage battle in that game, though. Like I said before when we were talking about Miami. But Buffalo 2-0 in the year, but their offense has struggled, putting up only 300 yards per game of total offense on average in their first 2 games. And then Buffalo won their division game versus Miami last week, and I alluded to it. Minus 104 net yards in that game. But looking at the box score, Buffalo received the ball off Miami turnovers 4 times in that game, and that resulted into 17 points. So they just capitalized on the turnovers. And then you got Buffalo did not have 1 turnover in that game, by the way. So it was more predicated on the fact that Buffalo was getting interceptions, fumbles, turnovers, and capitalizing, getting points where Miami didn't have any opportunities to do so. Jacksonville, they want to run the rock. They run it very well. 5.4 yards per carry on the ground. Run by committee with Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence, and Tank Bigsby. You know who Tank Bigsby is? Auburn, baby. He's been playing there in a while. When I saw that name, I got excited because Tank is an electric college football name. Buffalo has struggled in both of their games, stopping the run as well. 4.5 yards per carry given up to their opponents so far. And if you want to look at scenario-based analytics on this one, Buffalo kind of in a little bit of a sandwich. They come off that big divisional win versus Miami on the road, key game, Thursday night football, and then they have to go to where? Baltimore on the road, Sunday night football next week. So there may be a little bit of an overlook here. And of course, Jacksonville has played 2 playoff caliber teams within 1 possession in their first 2 games. I don't see them losing here versus a Buffalo team that they in their 2 wins were more lucky than good. So give me Jacksonville here, plus 5.5 as a play.
Anthony Latino, the odds fellow, alignment, I believe.
Yeah, I love that point differential. I love how tight they've been playing. This is really a kitchen sink game, right? That's what it comes down to. We've talked about these 0-2 road teams against the spread hitting at 60%. Jacksonville fits this mold along with some others. All of the AFC South stuff that the Shark is going to get into, right? This is going to be a close game. This is going to be a field goal game. I actually think Jacksonville can get it done outright, and I think Trevor Lawrence gets his first win in over 300 days? But who's counting, right? Not us. I think for me, it's really the way they played against Miami and against Cleveland. Those were both winnable games. This is a better caliber team. Jacksonville has to get trending upward here, and you're going to get Buffalo playing outside of the division. If Buffalo keeps taking care of business in the division, they're going to be fine as well. So for me, this is Jacksonville, all boxes checked. 5.5, 6 is too many points.
Yeah, you guys said a lot. I'm just pulling it up now because obviously Jacksonville lost the first 2, but you mentioned it going back to last year. They finished the season.
I think it's 7 or 8 in a row now.
Yeah,
they did win Week 17 last year against none other than Carolina, but that was 5 out of 6 last year. So they've lost 7 out of their last 8, and a lot of tight ones. There was an overtime loss against Cincy, a 4-point loss against Cleveland, 1 possession loss against Tennessee. And you go to this week or this year, as Guns mentioned, you go to the opener. Travis Etienne fumbles on the goal line in the 3rd quarter. That flipped the game. And they would have won that game 100%. Miami was not coming back. And I think even more importantly, he fumbles at the goal line. The defense gives up an 80-yard touchdown to Tyreek Hill the very next play. It looked like Va-Tech last night. I mean, that's how pathetic this Miami team was, or the Jacksonville Jaguars were in Week 1. And then you go back to last week, they outgained Cleveland. They were right there. I mean, this is how close professional football is. Like, it really comes down to 1 play, 1 3rd down, 1 4th down in plus territory between a win and a loss. Between a lot of these teams, there's a ton of parity in this particular 2024 season. And that's where we really want to get on board with these 0-2 teams. In a league that had a lot of separation, 0-2 teams are going to keep cratering. But in a league with massive parity, the buy low teams are going to come right back to the 2-0 teams, and they're just going to keep coming back to each other all year. So you really want to get on these 0-2 teams. And as Anthony mentioned, Buffalo, not in a great spot. They're in a look ahead in this whole thing. They are 2-5 ATS last 7 home regular season games outside of the division. And this is another one of those things where guys are good at one point and then they're not. Going back about 3 years ago when I was wearing the Bills hat and I was big on Josh Allen, they used to hammer these teams at home. They put up 48 points and just blow them out. But it's been a totally different story since. 2-5, as I said, last 7. And it's also scheme. They don't throw the ball as much, not as explosive. There's no Stephon Diggs. So their volatility is not as big. They're not going to get such margin in these games. And speaking of margin or lack thereof, this is actually the third time this year that in their careers that Josh Allen and Trevor Lawrence have faced off. And Trevor Lawrence is actually 2-0 straight up in his career against Josh Allen, interestingly enough. And here's another one of those little trivia quizzes for us in terms of the line. Buffalo played at Jacksonville week 9, November 7th, 2021. So again, not even 3 years ago. Guns, guess what Buffalo laid on the road in Jacksonville not even 3 years ago?
Would have been a big boy one too, right?
I'm going to say 10.5.
Minus 16.
Oh, yeah. That was good Buffalo. I forgot that was good
up.
Buffalo. That was good Buffalo. I remember that. Okay.
And Jacksonville at the time was 3-9 straight up.
That's crazy.
So this is exactly what we said about these teams. They flip it so quickly. And then you go back to last year, they played in London, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in week 5, October 8th. Jacksonville dominated Buffalo last year. 474 yards.
Their home
Buffalo
away
had
from home.
388. Jacksonville had 38 minutes of possession. Jacksonville was in complete control of that game. So I think Jacksonville matches up well schematically against Buffalo. And you talk about the line, 2021 road game, as I said, minus 16 in London last year. Buffalo was minus 5.5. So you talk about books moving the line one direction and the result correlating. That's what line functionality is. Books loved Jacksonville last year in London. 5.5 Buffalo in London should come up at home to 7.5. This comes down at open to 4. And this is graded Buffalo to win the game by 1 point at most. So either Buffalo loses or they win inside of a field goal. We love Jacksonville on Monday Night Football. 3-way collab plus 5.5. Final game on the card. We're going to talk about it briefly. 8:15, Cincinnati hosting Washington. We're not entirely sure why there's a doubleheader tomorrow. You guys have any idea why there's a doubleheader tomorrow?
Money grab, probably.
They didn't do like a double, like usually.
Usually it's the opener. Usually it's earlier in the season.
So they did it. So I know they're changing stuff around.
Yeah.
They're putting games on Friday here and there. So things are, they're doing things a lot different than they have in the past. So this is it's not like a weather thing. I know that for sure. It just it's just a double header on a random Monday.
Yeah, like I don't understand. Like, first of all, why week 3? It's not like the baseball playoffs. Like the baseball playoffs, like college football, no, NBA's not starting. Like it actually makes no sense. There's not any other conflict or anything. And if you're going to do this, why not do what the NBA was doing? I believe it was either in the play-in tournament or in the playoffs. If you're going to do a doubleheader on a weeknight, put the first game at 5 o'clock.
Right. Don't stagger them. Right. Yeah.
Don't overlap. What are we doing? It's actually terrible. Put the first game at 5. These guys are already used to playing occasionally at 4 o'clock anyway.
That's what they usually did. I think the early season one was usually a complete 3-hour gap, you know?
Right. I remember back in the day, Jay Cutler was playing for the Broncos. They tipped off against the Raiders at like 10 o'clock.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, we should go to the league office and be like, guys, we have a plan for you. You want to get viewers?
Park Avenue. Let's go.
Unbelievable. But any comments on this game?
For me, I think we'll break it down a little bit more tomorrow. You'll see the three of us on Twitter getting into it. It's probably Cincinnati early and often. They probably cover. It's probably a smash spot. That Commanders team, especially coming off the high of the victory, a sloppy one they probably didn't deserve against the Giants. I just don't think they're as talented to keep up. And you see the upward momentum of Cincinnati post week 1 every single year, right? Week 1. Terrible. I think perception probably shows you think that carries through to the first half, but it really doesn't. They start picking up steam, even with some losses and tough losses in week 2, 3, and 4. So I think, again, coming off a tough loss for Cincinnati, another 0-2 team. We've talked about it. They got to get going.
Yeah. Guns, you got anything on this one?
It would be Bengals first half, Bengals game. Listen, Washington.
Good teaser option.
There's one word for Washington. They're ass. Okay. They are. I'm sorry. You beat the Giants because their kicker got hurt in the opening kick. So they had to go for it on 4th down. They had to go for 2. They had to. Even when they got into field goal range, they had to go for it. The Malik Neighbors makes that catch. It's a whole different type of scenario there at the line. you won the yardage battle last week versus the Giants, but we already said it before. Giants, Dable, he's going to get fired eventually. We're just figuring out what day that's going to be. Then you have to go back up that momentum and go on the road after winning your divisional game versus a Cincinnati team that has just got. I mean, you got beat by the Patriots in egregious fashion. A lot of outliers as far as turnovers go. Bend not break for the Patriots in that game, and then you had the game in complete control versus the Chiefs, and you let them off the hook. Fumble touchdown, and then a 4th and long, PI call, kick a field goal, you lose by a point. I think Cincinnati is they've been 0-2 before, and they've been a playoff team being 0-2, even though the analytics tell you that it's rare that you're a playoff team when you do start 0-2. But I think Burrow's going to rebound here. You get to go play a Washington team, and I think this is going to be a game that I would only take the Cincinnati side. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I'm looking at the standings now. Pittsburgh's sitting at 2-0 and favored today against a Chargers team in a bad spot. They could easily be 3-0 after today. Cleveland's hosting the Giants today. They're going to win, so they're going to be 2-1 after today. We expect the Ravens to win and go 1-2 after today. So if Cincinnati somehow does not win tomorrow, and with some emphasis, they'll be 3 games back in the division. And I think that would be the biggest gap in the league, where one team's 3-0 3 can't get any wider than that. So they're not going that direction. And not only that, but I think pretty interesting here. Currently, they're sitting 4th in the division, but they have the 2nd best point differential in the division. They're actually only -7, and Baltimore's -10, and Cleveland's -11.
That matters a lot. That's a big
definitely.
That's big.
Absolutely. And you said it, Ant, but the statistics don't lie. Burrow, the narrative that we've also said on this show is that he doesn't really play before like week 8. I started to look at it in more detail yesterday. Outside of week 1, let week 1 just be what it is. For whatever reason, they don't show up in week 1. He's actually 10-3-1 ATS at home in his career outside of the division. So he does play great in these spots. 10-3-1 ATS in these spots. And, as you guys mentioned, Washington just won a game against the Giants. Giants are terrible. That was not Washington being great. And you saw what Washington did in week 1 at the Bucs, 37-20. This is a blowout line. I think tomorrow night we'll probably end up on Jacksonville, 1 dog, 1 favorite. Not that I really care about that, but I know a lot of people actually like that. 1 dog, 1 favorite. I think that's the way it probably goes tomorrow. So
I do like this look from Kelly too on the over on the passing yards. I think Burrow's just due to have himself a day on the passing. If you're going to do it, you can do it against Washington. Over passing yards, 1.5
prime time.
Yeah.
Well, that's overpassing TDs, actually.
Passing TDs. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it for this one, guys. 113 in the books. We appreciate you guys on X and YouTube interacting with us. I say it every week. NFL is a competitive marketplace. We'd love to bring you the top hype, conversation, analysis, and picks. I got 6 top plays. Tennessee on the money line, 125 early week. Indy money line -118. Tampa Bay -6. Las Vegas -7. Baltimore 110. And Jacksonville Monday Night Football +6. Odds fellow 4 plays. Cleveland Giants under 38.5. Chargers Pittsburgh under 35. A collaboration on Tennessee. He's on the spread at -3. And a 3-way collab, Jacksonville +5.5. Guns picks, Houston, Minnesota under 46. Malik Willis under 13.5 completions. Miami +4.5. Baltimore collaboration on the money line. And Jacksonville 3-way collab +5.5. It is NFL, the extra points, the big show, the shark, the gun, the odds fellow, the first day of fall, my favorite season. The best energy is turned on. I'm in a great mood. A pleasure as always, guys. Anthony, a pleasure. Guns, close them out, and let's dominate.
Yeah, shout out to the chat, as Razor Sharp would say, probably a little bit louder than me, but Chris and Kelly and Spanky and Peter and Christopher and everybody that's been in this chat. Showtime slip. I'm just going down the list here. Sean Murphy, you guys are the best. Just getting the chat live here on a beautiful Sunday, and we got lots of plays for you. Let's catch some tickets, baby. And make sure you like and subscribe to the Shark Awareness Nation channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Gunsmith channel. Make sure you go follow us on X at The Odds Fellow, at Sharks and Sports 88, at Gunspicks, and let's have ourselves a damn Sunday. Till next time, let's cash some tickets. Let's dominate the board. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bang!